And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters, streaming from the footsteps of New York City. We are Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and thank you for joining us for our unique podcast community, where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Thank you so much for helping us grow. We recently hit 1,685 subscribers, so thank you for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. We love it when you like and share our videos. It helps our community grow. Also, make sure you join in the conversation by chatting and asking questions. We love how it makes the conversation more rich when you join in. To see our over 220 past episodes, go on our website at www.jasontram.com. jasontram.net, And there you can see any of our past episodes. You can see opera singers, concerto soloists, jazz musicians, independent singer-songwriters, rock bands, rap artists, and everything in between. So thank you for joining us on Music Matters. Our guest is a returning guest, Mardi-Ellen Hill, a distinguished composer and author and a really awesome person. I'm so glad you can join us. Welcome, Mardi.
Welcome, Jason. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm really honored to be here.
Well, we had a lovely discussion last time, so over a year ago. Where does that time go?
It went through a rather dynamic pandemic, right?
That's for sure. And we met during the pandemic, and now that we're getting towards the other side, hopefully, fingers crossed, it's great to meet you again.
Likewise. I'm very honored to be here, and I have, well, in the time that's passed, so much has happened. In terms of the work that I've created in any case. So I'm very happy to continue along on page 2.
So let's go back and just quickly before we jump into the MEND universe, let's talk about you and your artistic, your journey as an artist. So you have such a varied background and you've done such interesting work as a composer and author. Tell us how you started it all and just give us the short version of your career.
The short version. Well, I actually began at Bard College as a piano and voice student. So my entry into the music world, I was both a music major and a drama major. And by the time I left, I had gone to Lange School of Music, which now is actually part of Bard, and went back to Bard, graduated, and just very quickly went into the world of music from many different angles. As a young woman, I was a dance accompanist, a dance composer. I was asked, many of my stage opportunities began in the world of dance. I was invited to the American Dance Festival, to the International Festival in Cologne, and to another festival in Sweden. And there I was actually able to sit back and compose for the stage. So by the time I finished my dance career, I was already writing for the stage. So
the dance background, automatically you're connected to stories with narratives. That's just must be interesting to start with the narrative writing, not the abstract like the sonatas or the concertos, but more like the stage dramas. Is the drama what brought you in?
As a matter of fact, I was fired by a very well-known dance instructor who said to me that I had more control over the petit allegros than he did, because I was, just flying with the narratives. By the time the dancers took center, they moved away from the bar to the center, I was flying around with them. So that wild streak in me took hold of that narrative and just kept painting a picture. As a matter of fact, the first video that I had that I sent to the National Endowment for the Arts for the work that actually set the stage for what MEND is, was done in Sweden with a choreographer who had been with the Martha Graham Company. And we did a version of that called In Her Prime. And I took the narrative and put a vocal piece to it that wove in with the dance and used that to spring to, actually, you hit right on it, the idea that a narrative from dance was going to now move into a different kind of narrative, a narrative of words, and a much bigger opera stage. So it had this really organic development to it. I
So
think
the seeds for MEND were laid way back.
way back, way back. I really, well, first of all, I had a love for the stage because my stepfather was actually quite a very well-known actor on the stage who acted with Orson Welles, Groucho Marx,
Wow.
um, and many other very accomplished actors. So I grew up with him, and I grew up taking out the ninas from the signature ninas from the hair of the characters on the top of the arts and leisure section. And we actually kind of lived in a house where every move that we made from room to room was a different scene. So that idea of narrative moving in a superstructure, a stage that was moving like a home, was something that I actually grew up with. And I kept repeating it.
It is addictive. Once we have our taste of that, it is quite fascinating. And most of the times, people like write an opera or ballet, and that's and then it stops there. But your vision has gone so much further, and it's so much more encompassing. And it's over the decades that you've been working on it. It's grown into many other different areas.
Many
So
different. Well, I actually took this idea of music bits and started to build it into this work that I'm talking about. This is in the late 1980s, almost 1990. That I was building these music bits into this weaving between the dance and this vocalization that in every other scene, the narrative became much richer and bigger and kind of overtook the stage. So I was beginning to really challenge myself with how I could weave this stuff in a totally different way. And it was successful because I had sent it to the NEA, and they said to me they never saw anything like it, that they thought it was actually the head of the Canadian Opera Company was on my panel. And he said to me, I see a big work in this long before it was, what it is now.
wow. So it's always great when people recognize something truly original and give you that leg up. So this performance was done in what year, and what was the format? It was an opera, right?
It was a dance opera. I mean, the first one was, it was actually, I'm trying to think of the conductor's name, Richard Bradshaw. He was the head of the Canadian Opera.
Opera, sure.
Yes, on my panel. And I had been teaching at NYU in the School of Dance and Dance Education. And I had a wonderful person that I worked for. And she gave me the theater for 2 nights. So
Awesome.
I went to town with that. And so I took what I had done in Stockholm now to NYU while I was teaching there, and did a second NEA submission as building out all of these pieces into a much bigger fabric and piece of opera. But it took to the second one, and then I had a Yale producer in the mid-90s who put it on the stage. And I actually had quite a bit of press at that time. And from there, I really started to build what is the beginning of MEND. I wouldn't say that really began till the mid-90s. I had to get a very specific superstructure that I could manage and wasn't managing me. That was a learning curve. And I was doing that while I was, teaching my first teaching job at NYU and doing many other things. So,
as artists, we're always doing so many things just to keep the lights on, to keep ourselves working, but for you, no matter what else you were doing, this is always kind of in the background, right?
Right. I was trying to find some way to express things that really didn't have words, that really haven't come around till now. I mean, think about it. One could call it cross-media entertainment, this and that, but it really wasn't. It was something else very different. And luckily, the second panel that I had at the NEA noticed that. And I was actually the first woman to ever would be awarded in 2 years in a row quite a deal of money. So I was able to do quite a lot with it. I actually had my first challenge. By the time I was asked to be on the Works in Process of the Guggenheim series, and Mary Cronson kindly took me aside and said, you know, you're writing something as big as the Met. Do you have the money to actually do this? It never crossed my mind. So that was the beginning of realizing that I had to find a different medium than just. In fact, she said to me, you know, you'll be a dead opera composer by the time this is done. I had an agent at CAMI, and he said to me, send this music to somebody at CAA. This was by then the year 2001, and I did, and somebody opened it up. That was very strange. And then I began on another track, which was the beginning of building the stage idea, this factory of bits into the bits of the narrative, so to speak, the bones of it, into a film script. That took 2005, 2006. Right. So I kept building this machinery that I thought had something to say for whatever reason.
Well, I just love the fact that you're one of the only composers I know who you're a serious composer. You've done lots of work, and you've dedicated to this kind of storytelling. It's not just any one specific medium, and this idea that music can be the central component throughout the ages. Give us the core of like what makes MEND so enduring to you as a project, and what people can expect to see.
Well, MEND has this, you know, for people who know the commercial lingo, it has this Ready Player One aspect to it, right? I mean, it's moving through decades. It's moving you back through time. It's akin to much of what Arcadia, for people who know that stage work, attempts to do and does to a degree. MEND does it even more so in the sense that I connect more medium to it. But that took, again, from 2005, meaning I had to leave Los Angeles because I realized I was literally what I was doing was, as I was working, trying to make a living, I kept learning each new medium, and that I was a newbie in each new area that I was moving into. So by the time 2006 came, luckily, I had raised money from Jonas Nuveen, his family trust, and he had given me a gift to write this screenplay. And I said, you know, I'm not going to be a screenwriter. That's not really what I wanted to do. I had already had the stage play produced, or most of it. It had this kind of do you remember the Civil Wars? That kind of the way that kind of epic was shown in pieces. So that's how MEND was shown at the time. It was a stage play, meaning Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, the entr'actes, each separate as a separate presentation. So by the time I had a screenplay, I said, you know, this is not really the medium for me, and yet I would need to go back to New York to actually build a team to take out the pieces from this screenplay and connect it to this burgeoning social context of the internet and where a keypad was landing. Because in my head, the idea of the digital economy, this keypad, you see, was in each one of the characters, meaning it didn't live in the digital universe of a mobile keypad. This is before we were all gone mobile. But the fact that each one of my characters had this digital phenomena in it and could be transferred to an actual piece of hardware was my next thought of how I wanted to build this. Again, I also came from my biological father come from a very big science family, So,
Ah, okay.
so that's where that came from.
Arts and science converging. I like that.
Right, right. I had both of these growing up in a very big way. Um,
We love I think as people, as humans, we love these kind of like stories that kind of take reality and kind of bend it and put it together, and there is so much of that code that's with us all the time, whether it's a musical code or whether
of
it's this
course.
technology code or economic code, and you're kind of like adding that code in a different way. It's really exciting.
Well, that idea of that we each carry such an individual, unique, more than a unique fingerprint, toe print, whatever you want to call it, voice print, that is so indigenous and so personal was something that I was very, very, really in love with. I thought this is something I wanted to talk about for many personal reasons and for many other reasons in terms of connectivity to other human beings. I think it just as I began to age, of course, I was looking around me, and my teaching career was at places like Long Island University, different population than NYU. And I remember while I was teaching there was Columbine was the first horror, and I actually used a template from MEND on these young people where they would take their phone and I would give them an exercise. And I found that my students who came from all these different backgrounds stopped hating each other once they engaged in this musical activity I gave them that could mean they could express this personal code but still be connected to the person on the right, person on the left, and they forgot their differences. It was amazing.
I found that music is one of the only. I have these conversations with people across the world, and I find that music connects us in ways that society and politics divide, and there's so many things that divide us. But music is one of the things that can truly connect if we get down to the musical level. Because I find that all of my students. I teach an intro level course at Seton Hall, and all of my students they love music. They just don't. Once you get down, you break down the elements, they realize, oh, we all love this. This is something we have in common.
Right. It's well, you hit on something, which is breaking down the elements. And of course, within a adjunct position, which is what I was in, doing that within the scope of another, agenda was hard because it's time sensitive and you have only so much time to build a context around the population that's in front of you, right? So um, kids, of course, pick this up intrinsically. You don't have to explain much. By the time they were teens, there were other challenges to get past in terms of, who had a piano at home, who doesn't. So the keypad, meaning the phone, became a wonderful tool that did not separate anybody. That was
I'm just amazed by the way that your concept has incorporated technology to such a high degree. We collaborate back and forth, and some of your collaborations are so fascinating because you're so up on everything technologically related. How do you find time to keep up with the technology? I mean, I always find like, okay, I've got to research what Marty sent me. I'm fascinated. I'm always learning, so I just love to learn.
well. I have a fabulous as I sent you. I mean, the gift I have in the last decade really is a fabulous team. So I don't just, I mean, I read a lot, so does my team. My team comes each with 5 or 6 disciplines behind them. That's not,
Ah,
yes, that's a huge gift. And as disparate as we are, we all have this commonality of curiosity. We're endlessly curious. We understand learning curves. Um, we have a common language by now that was built over many years, but that took time. Um, I read voraciously and very quickly, sometimes way too quickly. Um, and what strikes me always is the business of terminology and how terms become uh, generations are separated by this ridiculous thing of, it's like cancel culture. I mean, you have to basically take that apart for people to understand what cancel culture really is, or why people even engage in that. One of the things MEND does not cancel any culture, meaning I'm pushing the reader and the user through these different time periods in order to show how the future is very different in any of us, which is a big theme, of course, in William Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer. I don't know if you're familiar with that sci-fi book, why he wrote it, but he talks about how the future is unevenly distributed. That is in great part due to our means for having access to technology and access to connectivity. People tend to project onto others that their own experience, that if they have XYZ at home, so does the next person. But of course, that's not true.
We all know that's not true, especially when we get to the emerging world, and that's really it's going to be such a huge concept going forward, is how to give people access, because people get access, they learn. I mean, the internet is such a powerful force in today's society that it's so hard to imagine life without it.
Right. So I began with the notion again that the keypad was inside of us, not outside of us, right? So that was a hard one. It's this idea of that I was kind of retooling or retraining the idea of the digital economy was not just this piece of hardware, right? It's in the language of tech, it's how basically wetware, software, hardware, that world where that comes together. And that actually is really what the metaverse is. So when you hear Facebook talk about meta, that they've gone meta, it's there. It's where that merges really for each person separately. And that's a very tough idea. But my thought was, this is a perfect time to bring in MEND, because the idea that music can live anywhere, right? Meaning it's living in the room all the time, that we put it there. It's living inside our brains. It is something that is more.
It's being constructed and deconstructed constantly, and then put back together in different sequences based on the music of today and the cultural norms of today. It's pretty incredible, actually.
Right. It has a malleable and adaptable quality that no other medium really has. On the downside, it becomes more elusive to people who think, oh, well, what's music? It's not something you can tangibly hold in your hand except for a score, and who can decipher that? Well, that's how I came to write this protagonist of mine, who is the ultimate outsider and the decipherer, because to show that this deciphering quality can be learned with the proper guide. It doesn't have to be somebody who is struggling through Sibelius or Finale like I've been, because those things take time, right? So,
as a composer, those tools are amazing. You look at like Bach. Bach was writing down his music, and he had to give it to his sons and daughters to copy and to get ready for the rehearsal every week. It's just astounding that today we can just put it in the computer with Finale and Sibelius and print it out and or PDF it to our players. I mean, we move at the speed of light now. Incredible.
Right. So, that's the Bach family is a perfect, notion of my idea of an idyllic life. A family that is sharing productivity to make music happen. And we don't see too much of that, right? Unless we have a performance scheduled. So that's what my characters are really fighting over in the story that I wrote, in a state fight of who gets to get hold of this production blueprint. Because my production blueprint is based on this idea of this young girl who comes with this code inside of her and who's killed because, well, she holds the secret access to this uh, marvelous thing that these characters have, which they're all trying to figure out. Nobody can really figure it out. And she dies with the access code.
Hmm.
So, imagine, right. So I had to put in a whole bunch of thrilling collisions that would show this time thing. Again, it's a very musical idea, right? Because the idea of rhythm in my characters, each one of them has this keypad, the coding, again, in a slightly different rhythmic quality that puts them all together. So I got to grapple with a lot of details that I had been thinking about for a very long time when I made this universe of characters.
Wow, I mean, to have such a long-standing and kind of depth to your concept, it must be amazing the depth which you put this together, because it takes so much time to write pieces of music and write pieces of drama, and the longer, like you look at someone like who, this is similar to like your Ring cycle, right? With Wagner,
Oh,
he's
for sure.
all
For
that time in.
sure. For sure. No, well, I didn't want to talk too much about that in person. For a number of years, people, I'm sure, at Plymouth Church, where I sing, got very tired of me, where where I, like every other person with a band or whatever, I was trying out everything that came into my head. Um, Now I've sort of passed that phase, but um, you kind of go through these stages of it to make it real to you, the composer or the creator, because otherwise, it has to live off the page. And when I first did this, I was afforded a tremendous opportunity between the works in process, between Yale, the NEA, even by the time I got to Hollywood to do the script. When I came back to New York by the mid 2000s, very different time period in my life, into the studio, into the tech, into, you know, the team, and it became a much drier exercise for quite some time. Not so much now, but making the whole idea live off the page to me was a very important part of the gestation in the beginning, because if I didn't do that, um, I couldn't really see how other people could use this. And I began to realize that I was writing something that had a real immersive quality to it, and that there would be hardware available, as there is now, to embrace that, right?
Hmm.
It's just the way, for example, we're now doing this hybrid thing between going to the theater and seeing opera on film, right? Nobody was doing much of that before. Um, I have at least 20 composers on my Facebook page who are doing operas for film, and in a big way.
I mean, before it was just something, that you could have the live stream on as something like, now it's like that was pieces were written for that. I mean, specifically for that
That's
in mind.
right.
It's incredible.
Right. So, now you have all these other uh, medium. Again, this was not written for all of this dispersive medium, but it was certainly written for the story and the episodes, which I hope will be sold in, very soon. I have some pending situations that I can't quite talk about, but that between the episodes and people's phones, they will be able to take this for themselves to all kinds of other levels, meaning
Wow.
I wrote the levels into the story. It doesn't mean that I need to actually show you all of those pieces of hardware. But that took a lot of planning.
I'm always amazed by the creator's brain. We're all such interesting, how incredible like someone like yours, your conception, your thoughts, and putting something like this together, and the depth of your concept, and how it's changing too. How you've added things like, all the most modern technological concepts. You're the metaverse, and I just think that's fascinating. I'm just can't wait to see where this creative blossoming goes.
Well, the whole idea of the metaverse really was, I was very interested in this molecular theory of putting the music into the cells of the characters. So it wasn't so hard for me to imagine a metaverse, someplace where the molecular idea of carrying music could be crystallized, meaning form, you know, stone, right? I mean, look, it's in Don Giovanni, right? But we don't think of it like that. We don't. But it is, because it's in that opera. I mean, if you look back into these operas, you see a lot of these ideas in there, but you'd have to have somebody point them out to show you how people actually, Mozart, everybody going back was thinking about these things. It just wasn't assembled in quite the same way as it would be now.
Well, we're different people, right? We're certainly, the society has changed. Some things haven't changed, though. When you watch Don Giovanni, I just did a Me Too interpretation of Don Giovanni about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, we had told through the eyes of the women that he wronged, and they're the ones that cause his downfall as he dies at the end. It was very interesting, and you know, it was about the records that his womanizing, his bad behavior caused. And it was incredible. And my students who were there, well, mostly university students, they were stunned. They were like, they loved we incorporated video and some other elements in it. But you know, it's sometimes just retelling it slightly is a powerful tool, because the music hit and the kids were able to really understand it. That we had video screens playing at the same time as the opera, and it really gave something visual that I think this generation really appreciated.
Well, you know, I put a lot of old-fashioned romance in my story.
Well, you start with a murder mystery. You start with this incredibly interesting science theme that mixes in with the murder mystery, and it's a world that you can see is going to be something special. I can't wait to see the other side of it. I can't wait to read it and see it.
Some pretty thorny, sexy issues in the girl, her mother, the men in between them. I mean, and you know, Game of Thrones type of big themes that come.
I think people are searching for the next fantasy or the next world building, because boy, I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan, but my family, we all kind of like, it's one of my guilty pleasures, and it was so good up to a point, and all of a sudden they didn't write the end. So they just slopped the end together, and it was just horrendous.
George R. Martin, didn't he? I mean, that's because
hasn't been written yet.
Right, he did. That's why. And you know what happens if it gets out of the hands of the creator, and obviously it does at a certain point. It has to, because it can't get out there. And that original creator doesn't have that backstory planned for that very last thing. Nobody has the that's another piece that I faced in doing this, meaning I learned how to do this fast now. But as John would tell you right here,
that's John Keel in the background. Welcome,
right.
John. Shout out.
Yes, he's right here. Come over here. So, right. So I had to learn about this whole idea of production, and the fact that I had actually engineered a streaming idea in the story itself. So MEND ultimately has a music idea that's showing the technology of streaming within the story itself. That's like, people were like, huh? 3 years ago, not now. So the idea is, it's showing that music is moving past the speed of anything, and that it has an economy to it, which is actually quite hidden, which is neither analog nor digital, but in a completely different realm. This realm we're moving into, crypto, metaverse, NFTs, and that it can be manipulated in my story to be produced very, very quickly. The point is, nobody
so let's back up and look at those two. So NFTs, non-fungible tokens. I've got a 22-year-old who's fascinated by everything technology. How did you weave that into a story that you're talking about something current? That is about as current as it gets.
Well,
tell us how you wove that in.
NFTs are basically, it's something that doesn't have a form until it's traded. It doesn't have a value, right? The point is, it has to be traded. So we're living now in the ultimate global commerce world, right? So I take on some pretty big science concepts in this story. One of them is local and global time, right? Because talk about the Game of Thrones, it has this local idea of this sovereign information. I talked a lot about that in the first podcast, this acoustic envelope of information that is with this young programmer overseas that's sent to my young star in the United States who dies. The idea is that acoustic envelope, it's like a space, think of it as a spaceship of information, takes different forms as it's moving through time, teleportation, and when it lands in this cellular information, the digital, that's when it's traded. So I had already constructed this perfect economy for the characters to carry this non-fungible token, becomes realized, manifested, like a figured base is realized.
Ooh.
Right? So
linking the Baroque to non-fungible tokens. You are fascinating, Marty. I love that.
Yes. Right. I couldn't wait to do that.
Oh.
Right. I was like saying, hey guys, you only have to look back in time to find this information.
For those of you who may not be professional musicians, I love the concept of figured bass. Is like it was a system of numbers that they used so that keyboard players, given just a bass line, a written bass line, could fill out all the chords, and it provides the framework, harmonic framework for the composition. Just like Marty's MEND and that kind of that cellular, that digital code forms the
exactly.
fungible. It's fantastic.
I had to make that metaphor in my mind to be able to control this or to be able to manage it. And I did that with almost every piece of technology that I was learning. And if I couldn't find a harness for it somewhere in history, then I would discount it, thinking this doesn't work unless I can relate it back in time to something that has its seeds someplace else. In fact, I was talking to the fabulous organist at Plymouth, Bruce Allschlager, today, because he did a fabulous bass line, in the pedal point of the organ, and he gave me the score today, and I said, this is fabulous to have because it, again, enunciates this idea of the pedal itself is crystallizing the idea as this music information is taking another form. You need to actually focus where that happens in the orchestration, where that happens in the instrument, for me to actually put it in the ether, right? Otherwise, it's too intangible for me as well, right?
So how has COVID given you inspiration? And we went through such terrible times during COVID. I know every artist in the world has been through such pain and suffering, and the cancellation of all performances affected everyone so differently. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast, is just kind of document and talk about it. And how has some of the things you've dealt with during COVID, how has that manifested in your work with MEND?
Well, I actually was on the desk of someone at Viacom CBS solicited. So I was very depressed, meaning, talk about crystallizing. My work kind of fell into the desk of someone there and took a hard stop, right? So I was so mad, which is, I was just so possessed by the fact that I had come that far. And, somebody who saw this as a piece for television, and I thought, oh, well, this is, been going on for how long? And I'm so happy to have an exit. I had to rethink very carefully about how I was going to keep myself pedaling. And if you remember, I came to you, but I actually during October, somebody came to me from your podcast and wanted to take it to someone else in television, but she had said to me, speaking of COVID, that because of COVID, this was still in October. When did we do that? I think it was October 18th. I looked it up.
Wow.
She said to me that she was a producer and she already had cast the 3 women in the story. Right. So, talk about being upset. She said to me, well, I took this to somebody who I thought would buy it tonight, and they actually wanted a comedy. So So
There's always that luck factor, isn't it? It's
right.
always just
So
part of
I mean,
life.
I again, I had to remember what Hollywood is like, meaning this very fickle, meaning love you 5 minutes, next 5 minutes, I don't even recognize who you are.
I want a cop buddy comedy
Right,
instead.
right. So I had to work against a tremendous amount of frustration. That's all I can say. But I kept pedaling because I got some fascinating offers. Um, it didn't really, it took me another year, as you see, to come to the point where investors would come to me and say, this is far bigger than any just set of episodes or stage work or books. This is a universe that has uh, other pieces of information on in its horizon, and that had to do, I think, with the fact that I am a good educator. Or some people think I am. And it also could be made for children, meaning I have a whole section that I could take out of the whole adult protocol and lots of the racy topics and put it in the hands of children. Of course, that takes money and a production opportunity. So COVID also pushed me very hard. I refused to sit down. I was like, this is not going to stop here.
Well, you've been working on this so long and so diligently over so many years. And one thing I learned about just by getting to know you is you've got great energy, and that you find that. I mean, I know for me, all my shows were canceled. I had debuts in Europe, and they were all sheltered, and so it's the type of thing where you can either sit and complain about it, or you can just get back to work again. And eventually, after a little bit of complaining, right back to work again.
Right. And one of the things I missed most, and I told Bruce about this, was singing, meaning being able to show up a few times a week or at least once and sing. It's like going to the gym to me, to exercise that musical brain and placing the sound in a space that lives outside of me. Also, I don't have the same piano I had, and I was very, very, it took me a while to figure out how I was going to negotiate COVID in New York City.
Not easy. Tough times for us all, and New York was especially hard hit. And we're seeing like little hints of this. I just heard. I had my friend. I had a jazz musician from Macedonia on today, and I just heard that Vienna and Austria are closed down again, and Germany's considering it. So hopefully, fingers crossed that we've vaccinated enough and that the variants are held at bay. And
I hear you. No, it's. I just had a booster shot, so well.
Glad to hear it.
Yes.
We're sponsored today by Pfizer, and
Right. Right.
well, it's amazing how art transcends time, and how a story like yours. I just find it fascinating that it's very rare. Like I've met a few different authors, but not ones that are composers first, and then you combine your writing with your composing into something new and kind of very special and unique.
Well, out there now are new names for things that I have never come across before either. And one of them is what is it called? The technology of writing, meaning that code is in the writing. And that is a very MEND concept. It's not language like Tolkien, but almost, meaning I'm writing. The closest I can tell you is akin to like a Sondheim idea, because he puts in each character, he puts that musical information in the language, so that it's not just about an accent, right? It's not just about. It's a far deeper idea of a sensibility that's in the language itself. And this is a very MEND concept, going back to the fact that these I had to create a genome for them and a landing place, right? That they're actually like carrying this genome with them. And for that, I did not use melody. I used the whole idea of this antiphonal thing in the city that's actually this gets into a whole different layer of it, but it is transmitting the, it becomes this very Bach-like thing from this Charpentier thing that is going, it's like saying from that sensibility, the name of this, the hidden name of this family is known. But it's like saying the name, it's a very devotional, not religious concept, but theological concept, and certainly in Judaism, right? You don't say the name.
I'm going to put a link to Odette's Ascent that you wrote that was released for cello and organ at the time. And it's one of the characters from MEND. I'm putting that in the chat so people check that out. Just one of the pieces that Marty wrote for this that's kind of how it incorporates this concept. Tell us what people can hear when they listen to that particular piece.
The piece that I did in May.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, that was a wonderful gift Plymouth gave to me. So I was able to show there this antiphonal concept now in this kind of industrialization, 19th century. Plymouth is very much about this fabulous industrialization, 19th century. Beecher, 20th century comes to Brooklyn. And they have enormously gorgeous stained glass windows that tell a story. Much of Plymouth is a great narrative of its own. So I was able to bring Odette's Ascent there, the main theme of the girl in my story, and how she brings this theme from centuries before to the 21st century. So I was able to take what I had written first as a piano score and had it for cello and organ, with two other fabulous people who helped me put this together, Bruce Olschlager and Jamila Melville. And we put this together and we performed it there, and it was a fabulous experience because I was able to actually show how this kind of spaceship of this genome of information lands in this spot destined for this particular time. I think we put a little opening on it, right? A messaging center. That
yes,
actually,
you put a stained glass window.
Yes, but there's also some words that open.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, so that you actually see how this music comes to be. And it looks like a rehearsal because it was a rehearsal. And you see parts of the church and you see the instrumentalists in this narrative that's happening between the cello and the organ.
Beautiful. Well, it's just part of the depth of the story is that the quality music making that's a part of that. I think it's incredible. We have some love from the audience. Megan Maloney says that Mardi-Ellen Hill is one brilliant individual and a musical genius. The works of her mind belong in every home, and is truly an epic and original story. Thank you, Megan.
That's very sweet.
And I was looking back, and you always have such nice, you have your fans out there, and it's wonderful. And I think that more people that are exposed to your concepts and exposed to the story, I think people really should check this out. Tell us where we can go to find out more about MEND.
Well, the basic website, which is menduniverse.com, MEND universe.com.
Putting that in the chat.
Yes, menduniverse.com. And if you scroll through there, actually, I had a wonderful sponsor in Canada. This was also during the pandemic. Come aboard and make a nice pitch. And there are at least about 150 comments there that talk about the different pieces of the story. So it's a really good way to understand how the music, for example, the music that I put in May that you just put on here, it's now being orchestrated for a larger, a symphonic structure. And the whole idea of that is to actually crystallize or bring into view each of those characters in these card forms, in the doll forms, so that each of the characters have complete data streams to them. Right. Just like Lord of the Rings, in the sense of the characters have a complete information center and they're linked in one keypad.
Do you enjoy the fantasy worlds of others? Do you enjoy the Tolkien? Is that something you grew up
I'm
with?
not
Or?
a big fantasy reader.
Okay, interesting.
I'm a big biography reader.
Okay.
I'm a big I love real science.
I had you on because I happen to be a fan, and I just love this kind of world building, and it just always appealed to me because you look at Wagner, you look at the Ring cycle, the mythology, and how grand it is, and the more you dig in, the more you get sucked in, and I just love these type of stories. So I can't wait to see what the future holds for your work because I think it's quite brilliant.
Thank you. I love, no, don't get me wrong. I love going to see it. I just don't love reading fantasy. What the problem for me is I really wanted this to be grounded in the real physical world. And that was a hardship because in terms of genre, I think it made it hard for me to sell first time around. Because what would something like this be doing in our real world? Now, because of crypto, metaverse, NFTs, AI, and etc., people can make those links. But when I began, they could not. So I just have trouble with oddball names and just way out. I love real science. It's just me.
Well, the more you dig into real science, the more incredible physics and particle physics and nanotechnology, all this stuff, it is fascinating.
Yes, I mean, I have actually one backer who talks to me all the time about teleportation. And I'm always talking about, you mean quantum technology? So it's, this is sort of off the subject completely,
Not really.
but I was going to talk about this, what is the cancer book? The book on cancer. Right.
The Prince of Maladies or something
Yes.
like that? The Emperor of Maladies.
What is it called?
The Emperor of Maladies.
Well, there's a fabulous book about cancer and its developments and its cures that fascinates me, called The Emperor of All Maladies. And one of the reasons it interests me was because, again, in terms of the name, it talked a great deal about how the name of a cure had to reach a certain population and a certain, like, think about it as an acoustic thing for people to want to engage in a cure. And it had to do with the way the name evolved of a disease. And I found that to be fabulously interesting. It's saying same thing, name of a star, right? The name of a town that brings a population there. And I had already incorporated that idea in my idea of this town genome. Gets into Stephen King thing that I talked to you about first time around.
Sure, we did talk about that.
Right, because he does that fabulously well. I mean,
he makes the mythic, he makes the ordinary seem mythic and kind of grand. I love that kind of like his storytelling techniques, and he's been doing it for so long too.
Well, he can have one character talking to an interviewer and build out, and by the time he finishes that, you have gone through a whole story, a whole town, a whole nation, and it's just one character talking to an interviewer. I think that is a really some gift. But he also does this thing with the business of the names, and I'm sort of preoccupied with that for a very long time in my life. And also in terms of the romance, I put a real Romeo and Juliet, Montague and Capulet, idea in this story. So the idea that the singing, the antiphonal singing, is a very romantic, is this a piece of romance or is this a curse? That idea, right?
I was fascinated by antiphonal singing and the birth of polyphony and Western harmony, and that that came out of that's one of the defining moments of Western musical culture, is that birth of polyphony from Gregorian chant, and how that harmony doesn't, people don't realize that. I teach this to non-major music majors, non-music major students at the college level, that the that harmony that we consider today, like our chord progressions that people pick up a guitar and play, comes out of hundreds of years of experimentation of single voices moving around, and those formulas took hundreds of years to kind of lock in.
Well, there you go. I totally right. So basically, what MEND does is take that exact concept and is saying that 100 years, well, now it's like 100 seconds, boys. That's really where we are technologically, whether we like it or not. So the kids who are like on TikTok and on Instagram and everywhere are doing exactly that, not necessarily for the best, but they are doing that in this kind of speeding way all the time, meaning what took 100 years to lock in, now we're in a completely different moment. And that's how I was able to see the correlation between this NFT market and try to demystify the accessibility and say this is something we really need to look at because it's there to stay for quite some time, I think.
Oh, I think technology is going to keep taking us in incredibly new and wild directions that it's a wild ride to begin with, and I can't wait to see where it goes. I also can't wait to see where this MEND universe goes. I can't wait to hear the good news as things start to emerge, and all your hard work pays off because you're such a creative mind and a great person. So I'm so glad you came back. I've only had a few artists back on for a second time, and I'm so glad that you were able to fit in your schedule.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
And everyone should go on menduniverse.com. Again, that's MEND, menduniverse.com, and check out the work of Mardi-Ellen Hill, a brilliant author and composer, and just kind of a really interesting mind who really has a sense of the trends and is always on top of these things. And I just look forward to our continued conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marty, and we'll be in touch. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. To see our over 220 past episodes, go check out our website at www.jasontram.net. And remember, keep music alive. Good night.